Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. WBUR reporter Walter Wuthmann. How's it going?
It's going well. Good to see you, Daryl.
Good to see you as well. So, Walt, Boston's first Pride Parade after a 3-year hiatus was this past weekend. And you went down there to check it out. So take us there, man. Tell us, what was it like?
I did. It was Saturday morning. And like you said, it's been 3 years since Boston's last big Pride Parade. So I think there were a lot of questions about how it was going to feel. Were people going to show up? And the short answer is yes. Hundreds of thousands of people showed up all along the parade route from Copley Square through the South End and ending on Boston Common. It was a huge crowd. There were 10,000 people marching in the parade alone. People on motorcycles, people decked out in glitter and rainbow flags and leather and sequins and fishnets and every kind of costume you could think of. Thousands more all along the parade route. And then, like I said, at the end at Boston Common, where the parade ended and turned into kind of a festival. So, yeah, I think there was an open question, were the crowds going to come back after 3 years off? And the answer was like, yes, in a big way.
Oh, man, that's fantastic. So let me take a second and get into this hiatus with you, because up until a few years ago, the organization, Boston Pride, was the official organizer for the celebration. And this year's parade was organized by Boston Pride for the People. So tell me, just real briefly, the difference between those two organizations and why the switch?
Yeah, so the Boston Pride Committee organized Boston's Pride Parade for decades. But they'd been under criticism for a long time for excluding people of color and people from the trans community from their leadership ranks. The board was overwhelmingly white, and a lot of the same people held the main positions of power for a really long time. But it came to a head after the police killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the Pride Committee put out a statement that a lot of people in the community found really unsatisfying. Apparently, parts of it had been edited out, references to the Black Lives Matter movement. That was a big breaking point. Something like 80% of the Pride Committee's volunteers resigned. There was a boycott threatened. And rather than put on the first Pride Parade post-pandemic amidst a boycott, they dissolved. There was no formal Pride Parade last year. There were some small pop-up events that were apparently meaningful and successful, but this was the first big Pride Parade organized by the new leadership committee, like you said, which is called Boston Pride for the People, which is a new community group that kind of rose up after the Pride Committee dissolved.
What did you hear from people who attended? I imagine you got a ton of tape.
Yeah, I talked to people up and down the parade route about how they were feeling that day. I want to hear a little bit from someone named Alexis Wright. She's from Watertown. She actually just moved to the Boston area from the San Francisco Bay Area. So this was her first big Pride event here in Boston. And she said it really made her feel at home.
This feels very inclusive. I'm seeing everyone represented. I'm seeing families. I'm seeing full color spectrum in terms of diversity and race. And it has that energy of Bay Area pride. And I love that. So good job, new organizers. Good job.
She sounds very excited.
She was pumped. I actually had to cut out some of the tape because she was screaming so loud. It almost blew out my microphone.
Woo! Sorry. And yes! So I was missing this one.
Oh, man. So, Walt, that's one person there kind of representing the energy of the event. With this being the return of Boston's Pride Parade and it coming at a time when COVID anxiety is like at a minimum, right? Did you get the sense that people were celebrating that as well? This kind of this unthawing from the COVID-19 pandemic and its protocols?
I definitely did. The last time I went to the Boston Pride Parade, I think was 5 years ago, pre-pandemic. And Saturday's parade felt just like that. Same number of people, very few people in masks, people packed in tight together, celebrating, marching. It felt like a big, communal release, not only because this event had been put off for so long, but because all of these people, this huge community, were back together in person again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why Pride is so important to a lot of people. The leadership questions are important, but I think a lot of the attendees just really cared that the event happens. I talked to someone named Mars Fano. They just got off the ferry from Hingham. They were in high school the last time Boston Pride was held, so they were coming kind of for the first time as a young adult. And they were telling me about just how important it is to them to gather in a group of people and see themselves reflected in others. Here's a little bit of what they said.
It's about feeling seen. It's about feeling like you're not alone. It's always been such like a breath of fresh air. Especially for me personally, it's always been really good to just get into public and be like, yeah, I'm not the only person that's like me in the city of Boston. It makes me feel better to live here,
And I heard a lot of sentiments like that.
Right. So, well, with that said, this is a joyous occasion. People coming out and celebrating, not being alone, right? In a world that could be pretty hostile sometimes. Did people feel safe out there,
Yeah, that was a big question going into this. There's a wave of anti-LGBTQ legislation across the country. The Human Rights Campaign, which tracks this, says there's 500 anti-LGBTQ bills filed in state legislatures right now. That's apparently a record based on their statistics. In Boston, even a few days before the parade, there was a church in JP that was vandalized with homophobic graffiti. So this is a real threat, and it's a real fear. I know the new organizers were thinking also about the police presence at the parade. Pride started as a riot, an anti-police riot, after Stonewall in New York.
Is that 1969, right?
1969, Stonewall.
Yeah.
So the optics of having police at a parade is complicated, but the organizers say also necessary when you have thousands of people gathering on public streets. There was a police presence. It felt intentional. It didn't feel overwhelming. And apparently the Boston police didn't report any arrests or major incidents after the weekend. But this was a theme that came up in my interviews. Here's Curran Dillis. They came in from Hingham as well. And he was talking to me about how important it is to show up at events like this in the face of fear.
I'm happy to see that people came out, even though we're living in kind of a scary time for, LGBT plus people. I think it's important that public things continue to happen to show that, hate doesn't win. In general, I just think it's important that people continue to develop communities and just continue to show up to things.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Politics has never been stranger or more online, which is why the politics team at Wired is making a new show, Wired Politics Lab. It's all about how to navigate the endless stream of news and information and what to look out for. Each week on the show, we'll dig into far-right platforms, AI chatbots, influencer campaigns, and so much more. Wired Politics Lab launches Thursday, April 11th. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts.
And we are back. Switching gears for a second, I want to talk about another aspect of the parade. I want to ask you about how past Pride celebrations have been criticized for being overly corporatized. For example, big company floats come in and kind of push out the more local groups, right? Did you see any changes there? Was there more local representation at this version of Pride?
There definitely still was a corporate presence. I saw Delta employees marching, Citizens Bank, Chewy.com, Wegmans.
I don't know why that makes me laugh, but it's funny,
There is a corporate presence for sure, but what Boston Pride for the People tried to do was sort of de-emphasize it. So the beginning of the parade was very much dedicated to community groups, and there was a walking memorial to members of the trans community who passed recently. And Governor Maura Healey was in the front. The front of the parade emphasized smaller community groups and political leaders and community leaders, and the corporate groups came further back in the parade. There was sort of a de-emphasis. When I was talking to Mars Fano, this is something they really noticed, and here's what they told me.
Having been here so far, the only corporation I've seen is Wegmans, which is great. The rest of it is small businesses and stuff. It's been really cool so far. Way less corporate, yeah.
I do like Wegmans. Wegmans is kind of cool.
Yeah. But, there were people who still thought there were improvements to be made. I talked to Elakisha Spencer, who's the head of a local nonprofit in Boston who support LGBTQ youth of color in the city. And they were happy about how the parade went, but they also felt like there probably could be better representation of smaller groups like hers. Here's what she told me.
I think it is super brave of them for them to, reestablish Boston Pride, especially knowing all the backlash that was directed towards Boston Pride. So I definitely give them a 10 out of 10 for doing this, but we still always have improvement. There's always improvement to make.
Did anyone else at the event notice a discernible difference between this version of Pride and the previous iteration as it relates to diversity and inclusion?
Most everyone I talked to said they did notice a difference. And the differences they noticed were more representation for smaller groups, a lot more gender and racial diversity in the parade and along the parade route, and less of an emphasis on the corporate sponsors. Mm-hmm. I did have the chance to connect with one of the founders after the parade. Her name is Adriana Bolin, and she seemed exhausted, but also really happy with how the day had gone. Here's what she told me.
This is the pride we were looking for. We are the ones, and we came together to create something that's grassroots, community-centered, and it really feels like it became that.
You being out there as a reporter, right, having seen Boston Pride in what you said, 2018, what differences did you see for yourself? What stuck out to you while you were out there?
I definitely noticed some differences in the structure of the parade. But I think even more than the differences, I was struck by actually the similarities of Pride coming back. This is a massive event, for the community in Boston, but also across New England. Tens of thousands of people come in just for this. And it's a party, it's a celebration, and it's sort of a rebellion against a conformist binary world. It felt like that again. The crowds felt the same again. And I think that is the most important part of Pride is the people who show up and how they feel when they're there.
Well, with that, I'm going to say happy Pride, people. You know what I'm saying? Happy Pride Month. Let's celebrate, And Walt, thank you so much for your reporting on this. It's been awesome.
Great. Thank you, Daryl.
That's WBUR reporter Walter Wuthmann. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you want to see images from this year's Pride, go to our Instagram at WBUR The Common. If you just want to comment on this episode, you can send us a DM there, or you can send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I'll talk to you soon.